You open the anatomy book and see so many beautiful bones and muscles, so many structures intertwined and ready to be learned. Then you look at the model in front of you or the photo reference that you have and you see a lot of flat flash. Where do you even put all these bones and muscles? How do you even study anatomy? Is it even worth studying? These questions followed me a lot, especially at the beginning of my journey. And if you're also an art student, I'm sure they happen to you too. But as I keep going, everything is starting to make sense and the answers to these questions are starting to falling into place. In this video, I will talk about why you should study anatomy and also about the most useful exercises that help me learning it the most, and that will probably help you a lot too. And also, I will finally talk about a few useful resources. Hey there, I'm Katerina. I put my corporate career on hold and started an art academy at 30. Every week, I share my artistic journey, the real challenges, breakthroughs, and lessons I learned along the way. Welcome to my channel. So, a necessary disclaimer before we begin. In this video, I'm not pretending to be a teacher in anything art-related. As you know, my artistic journey began last February and I'm definitely not in the position to teach anything art-related. I make these videos to share my experience, to document what is helping me progress, and to talk openly about the thoughts and discoveries that are helping me progressing in this journey. I want to share all of this with you from student to student because you also might be on the same boat. And maybe some of the things that work for me will work for you too. This video specifically focuses on anatomy because on my week 25 at the Art Academy, I focused entirely on that and I've actually practiced the most useful exercise I've ever done to study anatomy. So many things suddenly become clear that I honestly wonder why I didn't do this exercise earlier. It really unlocked a new level of understanding for me. But before getting to that exercise, let's start from the beginning. Should you really study anatomy as an artist and why? If you draw, paint people or even animals, the answer is yes, you should study anatomy. And what if you work strictly from life or photo reference? Is anatomy still useful? In my opinion, and based on my standards and ambitions, the answer is still yes. But the real answer is it depends on how far you want to take your artistic skills. Maybe you draw just for fun, and in that case, take anatomy as far as you enjoy it. But if you're an art student who wants to make a career out of this, the answer should be that your standards need to be the great masters. And by great masters, I mean Michelangelo, Raphael, Leonardo, Rubens, Pontormo, Dürer, and so on. Yes, they were great because they were unique, but at the same time they could do anything they wanted from their imagination. Standing poses, sitting poses, foreshortening poses, torsions, all with precise placement of muscles and bones. They used models to validate what they already knew, but they drew mostly from imagination. Let's be realistic, that level of mastery is probably unreachable for us common people, but what we can try to reach is a decent level and convincing figures from imagination. And what if you don't want to draw from imagination? Is anatomy still useful? The answer for me is absolutely yes. Right now, I only draw from life. In fact, at the Academy, we have live models, or when models are not there, we draw from plaster casts. So we rarely use imagination. But since I started to study anatomy, I started seeing so many more things when I draw. There's a common saying that goes like, you don't see what you don't know, and you don't draw what you cannot see. And it's so true. In the first few weeks at the Academy, I used to ignore the small bumps or shadows that I could see on the model. But actually, each of those marks was indicating a muscle or a bone that was underneath the flat skin I was seeing. Indicating even just a few of them gives your drawing a lot more realism, makes understand gesture, and communicates the sense of the pose. So just to sum up, anatomy is very useful when you draw from life, but it becomes essential if you want to draw from imagination. Do I want to draw from imagination? Personally, I think I'll keep working from life, but I want my skills not to be solely dependent on a model in front of me. So that maybe I can start the drawing from life, but then finish the drawing at later stages using only my knowledge and the skills instead of the reference. One thing I know for sure is that I don't like exaggerated anatomy or extreme torsions or unrealistic poses or bodybuilder muscles in the paintings. That's not my objective, but it might be yours, and then you need to keep watching this video. So how deeply should one study anatomy? Well, again, it depends on your goals. But I have two pieces of good news for you. The first one is that, unlike surgeons, we don't need to memorize every name of every bone and every muscle that we have. We need to memorize the shapes and the forms. We also don't need to study the internal anatomy, but only the visible structures, so the bones and the superficial muscles. So the amount of information we need compared to doctors is way smaller. And reaching a good level of artistic anatomy is absolutely possible. However, if you just started your artistic journey, anatomy shouldn't be the first thing you need to learn. It can easily become overwhelming, in fact. Before starting a serious anatomy study, I think it's really helpful to be aware of proportions, gestures, planes, geometric forms, and how they move into space. Without that foundation, you won't be able to use anatomy properly. In fact, we often think of the anatomy as the skull or the écorché that is standing, the body's twist, bend, foreshorten, and the anatomy you study needs to adapt to that. One amazing book that we use at the Academy and that I've actually already mentioned here is Bridgman's Complete Guide to Drawing from Life. Bridgman simplifies the figure into dynamic masses and explains gesture, structure, planes, and light in a way that really helps before diving into detailed anatomy. Later in the book, he also shows how he simplifies anatomy, which is a good entry point. But the book I found the most useful for anatomy and which the Academy provided in PDF is actually Anatomy for Sculptors. I love it because it simplifies each part of the body into planes and then also shows the different muscles and different positions, often comparing them to photo references. Because of this, I think it's the most clear one and easy to study. There are other more famous books that are worth checking as well. So for example, Struttura Uomo by Zacchetta, Lolli and Peretti, or for example, Baum's Guide to Human Anatomy. I find them more advanced than the ones I mentioned before, so I found them most suitable for those who really want to become proficient in anatomy. So what do we do once we have all these beautiful books? Personally, I would first look at the whole structure of the body, so skeleton first and then muscles. And after that, I would look at macro areas, so for example, the torso, the back, the head, the legs, the arms. Only once you understand the general muscles, I would dive deeper into each of the parts. But be aware that blindly copying anatomical plates can become useless if you do it passively. Remember, these drawings don't need to be pretty, they need to teach you something. And it's something that I sometimes forget. My tip is to compare what you're studying with a real-life model. That's what we do at the Academy when we have anatomy classes. If we study the leg, for example, the teacher makes the model pose in different ways. For example, from the front, from the back, bending, in foreshortening, and so on. And we draw the leg in each position, trying to understand how the shape of the muscle changes accordingly. To memorize correctly, remember to focus on the origin and insertion of the muscle. That will help tremendously when you encounter an unusual pose. Of course, at home, you don't have the model, but you can always have your body and the mirror, or you can also find references online. So use those references and redraw them as écorché or skeletons in as many different positions as you can. And that's exactly what I did this week. I chose two of my previous drawings, one from the front and one from the back. I placed tracing paper on it and I first drew a skeleton on it and then I drew the muscles. It was super useful. It took me forever because figuring out the correct shape of the muscles, how they were placed, the angles, the insertions in different poses was very challenging. I constantly flipped through different anatomy books, but the answer was always in Anatomy for Sculpture, and that's why for me it's the best book to study anatomy. I've been told to do this exercise since last semester and I procrastinated it until now. And looking back, I should have done it earlier. It unlocked so much of my understanding. It was definitely the most useful and best exercise I did so far to study anatomy. By doing this exercise, I also noticed the mistakes in both of the drawings, and in both of them I made the torso way too long. And now I know the anatomical reason for that, which will help me avoid a mistake in the future. During my next drawing session, after the blocking phase but before the shading phase, I want to make a little anatomical study to understand where the muscles and bones are and understand what's underneath the skin of the pose I'm gonna draw. I think it will help me to identify mistakes early and build a more solid drawing, preparing me also for the shading phase. However, I will probably do this next year when I will return to the Academy in January as a part-time student. In fact, this week was actually my last week as a full-time student at the Academy. I would have loved to continue full-time, but it's quite expensive. And this kind of solution, taking a little break until January and doing part-time, will allow me to still continue studying at the Academy and get feedback from the teacher and draw from live models, and at the same time experiment on my own with online resources, which are amazing as well. During this break, I will keep studying anatomy through the exercises exercises that I mentioned you, and also keep preparing content for you. I actually have so many ideas. But if you want me to talk about something specific or you have something in mind, please let me know in the comments. I read them all and I answer you all. I really hope that this video was useful. And also I have a question for you. Have you found any exercises that are particularly useful to study anatomy? Please let me know in the comments. I think it will help me and the whole community that will read this comment. Thank you for staying until the end of the video. Please don't forget to like the video, leave a comment and subscribe to my channel. It will really help to grow my channel. And I hope to see you in the next video. Bye!